Okay, yeah. And so Kathy might just, obviously she's going to swing in late, so we'll just welcome her when she shows up. How's everybody doing? Okay, thank you so much for giving your time. I know it's crazy and busy and a lot going on, so really thank you.
Thank you.
This is way better than cleaning the house right now, Sarah, so.
Oh.
Anything if I don't have to do another dish.
I caught a New York City subway to come down to Brooklyn because I don't trust my 4-year-old is gonna like.
Oh, really?
Violet's been Zoom bombing every meeting that I've been doing.
Oh, good. Well,
So
it's
like,
that or somebody's cats or dogs. It's kids, cats, or dogs, right? It's
Yeah.
for Zoom bombing. We welcome all, right?
Or spouses. I was on a Zoom call the other day. My wife came in with like a new thing, a new appliance or something, and she unplugged the wireless network, and it's just like.
Kathy, unmute your mic. Unmute. Nope. Try it again. Nope. I don't think so. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So can you say something so we get a sound check?
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So I was saying that when we start, there's an intro that Kurt Bob here, he's going to be running the show for us. And they have kind of a intro for focus on the story events. And then after that, I'm going to ask everyone to just do a little self intro. And we'll just, we're going to try to go in alphabetical order.
So our attendees are joining, and we're going to kick it off officially in about another 2 minutes.
Okay. I made that. I just want you to know that
Nice.
I built that. I went and found all your pages and put that together.
Beautiful. Looks great.
It's pretty awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, looks really good.
Yeah. Looks like we have 175 people so far. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can see the number of participants.
Climbing.
I know. People want to pitch their ideas. Hi, Morgan. Hi, Anita.
All right. So it's 4:32. I think we can start. Welcome. My name is Kurt Bob, and I'm a member of the Focus on the Story community. Focus on the Story is a nonprofit organization dedicated to celebrating stories that make a difference. Our mission is to support and encourage visual storytellers of diverse backgrounds and bringing attention to critical issues, bridging cultural gaps, and sparking social change. One of the ways we work towards this is through our annual photo festival, which you're a part of today, virtually, but you're a part of it. We have an extraordinary program in store today. And in light of today's social and political climate, I think many of you out there who are working to tell stories, your own stories from perspectives and point of views that aren't always recognized or visible, you'll definitely find today's panel to be incredibly beneficial. Today, we're going to hear directly from some of the industry's visual professionals about the best practices on how to craft the perfect pitch, right? Like, you have a story, how do you find the right audience for your ideas and avoid some of the common mistakes that people make as they develop stories to pitch. Leading today's discussion will be Sarah Leen, who is the founder of Visual Thinking Collective. I think it was founded in 2019 as a community for independent photo editors, teachers, and visual managers to serve photographers, media, art, and academic institutions, NGOs, and corporate clients in telling their stories in unique, authentic, and highly visible ways. Sarah is also the former director of photography for National Geographic. And before that, she worked nearly 20 years as a freelance photographer for Nat Geo magazine until recently, when she joined the staff as a senior photo editor. She's won multiple awards for both her photography and photo editing. And we're glad to have her lead the conversation today. I'm gonna turn this over to Sarah to introduce the panel. But before I do, I just wanted to remind our participants that you can, as we continue the discussion today, be sure to use the Q&A box to send your questions along. All right, over to you, Sarah.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It looks like we have about 218 people already. It's awesome. I really thank you for joining us, and also to the panel for taking the time. It's a really busy time in the world. A lot of important issues that need to be discussed and reported on. So I really appreciate you guys taking your time to come and spend with us in the Focus on the Story community. I wanted to just start, I'm gonna let each of you, would invite each of you to do a short little bio about yourself. We're gonna start with Denise.
Hello, everybody. My name is Danese Kenon. I'm the Director of Video and Photography at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm fairly new there still. I've been there about a year and a half. My stop before that was Tampa. The weather's a little bit different in Philly. So I'm happy to be in Philly and have enjoyed meeting so many photographers since I've been here. So it's been good.
Great, thank you. Next will be Olivier.
Hello, everyone. I'm Olivier Laurent. I am an international photo editor at the Washington Post, with a special focus on Africa, Middle East, and Asia, which is where I'm basically assigning photographers for the paper.
Thank you, Olivier. Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Moran, and I'm the Deputy Director of Photography at National Geographic. And just this week, I have hit my 39th year there. But this job is fairly new for me. I was actually the senior editor for natural history projects prior to taking this role on last fall, and worked under Leen, of course. So I've just left editing behind for more of a management role. It's been a ride.
And congratulations on your anniversary. Kathy was like born in the closet at the Geographic. She's been there a long time. Quentin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Quentin Nardi, and I am the Chief Photo Editor for Smithsonian Magazine. It sounds a little wonky as a title, but that's DC for you. I'm like the Supreme Court. So I've been there for about 3.5 years now, and before that, I was the photo director for AARP, the magazine, and I worked on their digital platforms. Before that, I was a photo editor for Ski Magazine. I was at Outside Magazine. So I kind of have a magazine DNA coursing through me. So I'm love to talk about it.
And Laura.
Hi, hey everyone, I'm Laura. Greetings from Brooklyn. I'm one of the co-founders and the executive director of Photoville. I think most of you know us of the folks who put on that crazy photo festival we're shipping containers, but we do so much more. We have a year-long education program. We reach a lot of students from across not only New York City, but across the country. We have a really robust educational and professional development program for educators. We produce a lot of public art throughout the country, including the fence, but also we've been commissioning a lot of different projects and different artists of late. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Marisa.
Hi there, I'm Marisa Schwartz Taylor. I'm a photo editor in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times. I mostly work on stories related to politics, the White House, Congress, and how government policies affect the country. And before the New York Times, I also worked at the Washington Post and Time Magazine.
Great, thank you, Marisa. So that's everybody. Yeah, great. So I want, again, just a little recap. Today we're going to talk about best practices for pitching your story ideas to publications and different platforms, exhibits, grants, etc. And we'll spend about an hour discussing everything amongst the panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we should be done by 6 p.m. So stay with us. So I want to start, I'm going to kind of start low and go high. So what I'd like to start with is, what comes to your mind when you think of the one thing that really ruins a good pitch? And so everybody just think on that for a second, and then I'm just going to ask each of you to say the one thing that ruins a good pitch for you. Denise, can you start?
Let's see. I think what ruins it for me is there's a few things, but one thing I can say is being locked in and not being flexible. So, for example, if you have a story idea where you're like, this is where it's going, this is where you're going, and you ask a question, you know, what about this? Have you considered this? You know, but if you're locked into the story, I feel like there's no room for exploration. And I feel like you could be missing part of the story by being tunnel vision. So having the ability to kind of see beyond what you currently see.
That's great advice. Thank you. Olivier.
What ruin a good pitch would be not including photos in your pitch.
That's a good one.
Or going on and on and on for 3 or 4 pages to explain what your pitch is. A lot of us have received way too many emails, see way too many people, and if you're not able to describe your pitch in a couple of paragraphs, then I don't think like the pitch is
good.
Perfect.
Good advice. Quentin, have you got one?
I do, and this is something that we deal with a lot at Smithsonian Magazine, where, you know, we cover art, history, science, and technology, and make your pitch relevant to whom you're pitching, because so many times I wish we covered environmental degradation stories. I wish we covered human rights stories, but we just don't. It's not our wheelhouse, and I'm never going to run a story on, you know, the plight of, you know, a group or something, you know, some environmental situation somewhere. So it's kind of a waste of your time, and it's a waste of my time, and just keep it relevant.
Yeah, I want to get back to that later too. That's a really important topic. Laura.
I think people not doing their research. I think I can speak for myself, but also for many of you, that I think you need to know who you're pitching to and do your research, not only what they publish, but what they've been doing lately, what their mission is. So from an exhibitor's point of view and producer, think about who their audience is as well. I think that's really important to research that.
That's one of my questions I wanted to talk about. So great for breaking the ice on that. Let's see, Kathy.
I'll build off of what Laura just said. Really do your research, because sometimes I'll get an amazing pitch, but it will be a story that we just published. And I think the other thing is, don't come in, as Denise said, you've got to come in with a degree of flexibility, but that also means don't tie my hands by coming in paired to a writer, for instance, who may not be the best choice for the story for whatever reason. So, you know, I think you really need to stop and think about those things. You need to come in with a degree of flexibility, but you need to do your research.
Mm-hmm. Really good. Marisa.
I'd say not having a unique angle to the story, it kind of ruins the pitch. You really need to explain to the person you're pitching to why this is the right way to tell this story and why you're the right person to tell this story, especially at somewhere like the New York Times. We pretty much cover all the news. There aren't many stories that we haven't covered in some section or another, but if you have an interesting angle, then we're definitely open to hearing it. Another thing too would be making sure the story is actually a photo story. I feel like a lot of times people will pitch stories that are fantastic stories, but they're much better as written stories with a few accompanying photos instead of a photo essay to pitch to a photo editor.
Really good point. Really good point. So I think of pitching ideas as, stories and versus topics. I would say that, so animal rights is like a topic, but the zookeeper who opens a rescue organization is more of a story. And I'm just wondering if you agree with that thought and the difference between topics and stories, and how you feel about pitches that you receive. What's a stronger pitch, the topic or the story? Olivier, you look like you're thinking hard.
Well, like if you're going to pitch a topic, you pretty much need to be prepared to address it. Like there's too many pitches that are so vast and global that like it's realistically not possible to finance, especially at a newspaper or magazine, in one go. I think some photographers might have that ambition of addressing certain wide-ranging topic, but that's more of a career move. It's not a one-pitch thing.
Anybody jump in on this one? What do you think about getting a pitched a broad topic versus a more focused idea?
I think a more focused idea is really important, especially if we're looking at a lot of pitches every day. You really want to have a clear sense of where this pitch could go and what the tangible things are that can actually be photographed and how you're going to tell this story. There's definitely room for flexibility and to change the story up a little bit, but I think having at least a clear direction for where you want to go out front is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, I think the micro approach is always going to be more successful in terms of more powerful imagery and just in making your stories more succinct than the topic. So I prefer the micro as opposed to the macro.
I would say also like practice your pitch. If it takes you 10 minutes to explain, you don't have it, right? A lot of times when I say, well, what's the story? If 5 minutes later we're still there, you don't have it. So practice pitching that to someone before you say it. We absolutely want the next great story and we want to hear about it. But if you have 12 minutes in a 12-hour day, and I'm giving you 10, I want that pitch to be pretty tight.
Yeah.
I always say to folks, think about it as your elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Because you don't know, like you have that certain amount in an elevator. If you don't know how to talk about your work in that small amount of time to get someone's attention, then you may lose them.
I think
Go ahead.
It boils down to narrative. You can come in and say, well, you've got some great big idea, but once you start to take it from that topic or idea level down to what's the actual story, what are you going to say, what are you going to photograph, then that makes all the difference in the world. You can say, I'm going to go do lions. Well, what are you going to do about lions? Oh, well, maybe it's human wildlife conflict, and then you've got something you can start to talk about and actually map it out visually.
How much do you all consider that you want to take somebody's idea and maybe shape it for your particular publication? Like you think, oh, that's great, but if you do a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, then it would really work for my publication. Does that happen? Do you have you had those experiences? Anybody?
I think it happens all the time. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of building the relationship with the photographer and really digging in and determining the best way forward with the story. So again, it gets back to, there has to be flexibility when you come in to understand who's this publication, who's their audience, and what is the story that we are going to tell.
Well, and lots of times, coming from the perspective of the magazine, I'm able to kind of share what I think would make the maybe story stronger, or just what I think like my editors might really go for and appreciate. So if I can kind of almost collaborate a little bit and bring kind of my thinking to the photographer, and we can kind of elevate the pitch. Maybe it's not exactly what he or she came to me with, but we can kind of work it out and make it better and stronger, and maybe that changes things a little bit. But I think if the photographer's open to that, it's just going to be a better fit. And I want to show the work, I want to do the work. It's just maybe a little bit of that tinkering and modification that is really important.
I would say too, something to consider is if it doesn't fit for your particular publication, like I'm a local newspaper, right? If it doesn't fit for me, the network of photo editors is pretty small. I might say, well, you know, that's not for me, but I know 2 photo editors that would probably be interested in something like this. And so that happens a lot where, you know, I'll call somebody and say, hey, our paper won't do this, but I know this is something that you guys do. Let me hook you guys up. And so I think that's important to know too, that the network is pretty strong.
Yeah, and we talk to each other, and which is really important. I was just thinking, going back to the idea of research and stuff, like when a pitch comes to you, like how specific, I understand about the flexibility and being willing to shift according to the needs of the platform or publication, but should a pitch have be like names of people, where I'm planning to go, and also what I think is really important is that I actually can do this in terms of access, right? Not pitch something that you don't even know if you can get in. So how specific do you like it to be, the pitches? And Laura, you can jump right in. I mean, you have people pitching you all the time for Photoville workshops, you know, exhibits, etc., presentations.
I can talk about this. I think that it also depends on the level of what's our investment. So if we're going to commission this and put a lot of money and time and resources as a nonprofit, and I think a lot of folks think that too, I want to know that you're already halfway there. I want to know that you've already made these connections, because we've actually gone down the slippery slope where we've actually started working with some photographers, and all of a sudden that those connections or those partners or that extra funding were not actually available. And so I think it's being very realistic, and it's actually better to be honest and saying I don't have it than actually saying you do and having to
back out of that.
Because also you can always work with someone once. It's all about getting the second or third job or project. That's really important.
That's great advice. I love that.
And the flip side, Sarah, just real quick, like I had
Go ahead. We got time.
A very established, a really high caliber photographer come to me with an amazing idea, an amazing project. I was super excited about it. And it kind of all fell through because of, you know, certain international agencies that just weren't granting permits or whatever. And he didn't really invest a dime. I didn't invest a dime, but I mean, I was willing to kind of go as far as he could go with it. And it didn't happen, and that was okay. But, you know, I was glad that we at least tried, you know, maybe we'll try again. But my point is that, you know, sometimes the pitches aren't going to, you know, come to fruition. And that's a bummer, but, you know, keep trying.
How important is it for the idea to be unique and not have already been published somewhere else? What's your sort of, you know, your thoughts in terms of when you might publish something that's been published already somewhere else? Or it's got to be first time with you? I'm sure each of you might have a different answer. So I
don't think it needs to be first time worldwide, but like if you're pitching the exact same story that's been published by the New York Times, for example, to the Washington Post, it's very, very unlikely that I will be publishing it. But like if it's been published in an Italian magazine or a Hong Kong paper, that's a complete different audience. So there's not this overlap that suddenly compromises the story for the Washington Post.
Anyone else like to talk about
Completely, that? I agree with Olivier. One thing to consider though is how the story was done in the past. Maybe if it was done somewhere else as a written story and you're pitching a photo essay that's much more in depth in the lives of the people in the story, whereas the one that the Post did maybe just had a few photos with it. I think there might be a chance to get away with that if it's along the same themes, but not the exact same story. So I think there's some room for leeway, but you definitely want it to be as original as possible.
Kathy?
Well, as you know, most of what we're doing is original as signing, but when people do come to us with packages, we've been able to work it out where, you know, we can sort of say, all right, we're gonna we're going to run these and you'll hold this for us. And then we'll let them publish with other media. So we try to find a way to be flexible, but to at least extract a story that is ours, and it feels different from what any other story might come out of that body of work. But yeah, I think it's a case by case basis.
Is it different thinking running something online versus in print for those of you who have print in terms of that decision? Does it matter?
Print?
What?
What's print?
What's print?
I know photographers love to see their work in print, but the
Right.
very, very large majority of our readers now is online.
I know, but it's hard not to, as a photographer, not want to be in print or in a book, or right. We like to make things, you know. So what's the best form that you like to receive a pitch in? Like through an email, at a portfolio review, a PDF, like, and I want to dig a little bit more into with photos or not, or no photos, but like, what's the best form? And we did have a question earlier from somebody who was listening that, like, and how many pictures would you want to see? So what's the best form? Anybody?
I like.
Go ahead. What?
Go for it.
Oh, I was going to say most of the pitches that I get are over email, and I'd say PDF or images attached to the email are usually the easiest. So that way you can skim it quickly on your phone or on your laptop or whatever device you're using to check your email at that time. And then if you're interested in the pitch, you can go further in depth and ask the photographer to maybe send more images through Dropbox or something like that. But I think just a quick pitch in an email with images that are easy to scan on any device is the easiest thing to do to get the most eyeballs on it.
Denise, what do you think?
Well, I'd like to see them, I like to get email. I like to get something emailed, either a WeTransfer folder or, a secret link on their website or something like that. But I am terrible with email. And so I need to know that it's coming, because we get a lot of email in a day and it could get caught. And so a lot of times somebody will text me. My phone number is not hard to find. They'll text me and say, hey, I sent that email to you, and then I'll take a look. And so I think it's important too to ask the photo editor what's their best way to communicate. We get a lot of different forms of communication and a lot of different ways to make that communication. So yeah, I like to look at them on my laptop.
Yeah. Anybody else? Quentin, how do you like pitches to come to you?
Well, for me, email definitely, but then, I'm just like kind of like the gatekeeper in a sense, and I have to kind of, I will speak, if I'm interested in the pitch that you're sending to me, I have to discuss it with my editors. And so if I have to kind of reformat what you've sent to me, if I have to make a PDF to pitch your pitch, like, I'm not so interested in that. Like, I kind of like a nice, a nice package that I can then share with my editors. And these days, we're all emailing everything, so it's not like I can run down to their office and show them. But I preferred like a nice, like a PDF with the photos and the text together, and not like a big file of I don't want to download a ton of pictures and kind of do it that way. So just something that's kind of already completed, that's ready to show, I guess, is helpful for me.
Laura.
I can add for the being
yes.
a person. So if you're pitching to a lot of like nonprofits or different organizations that put on festivals or exhibitions, you should definitely follow instructions. Especially galleries, I will say a lot of galleries do not like unsolicited emails. Some of them have like yearly information, so that's really a good thing to pay attention to. That's why sometimes portfolio reviews to connect to those gallerists or other events are really useful. For us, and for those of you who know us and me, I love a good form. We are doing so much, and it used to be emails, and I just couldn't, it was really hard to keep track of, especially when it's not just an image or it's like a concept. It's like, I want to do this and that. And when there's technical elements, so really follow instructions. And again, do your research on who you're pitching to, so you know the best way of actually sending that information. And if they say a form, do it via the form.
Great. Kathy, What do you how do you like to receive a pitch?
Well, I like it. I like it with email, but I also love a WeTransfer with a big honking bunch of pictures that I can download. Before I would bring them to Sarah. So
I think I don't recall who I think Quentin you said I think it's really important for people to understand that in a lot of cases the photo editor is not the final word. Right. On accepting it, and maybe you all could talk about that, because I think sometimes they think, oh, you're the green light, and in some cases you might probably are, but we all have editors on top of us. So be good. How do you feel like that works? Because you're going to have to pitch the pitch, basically, is what you're saying.
Right, and the more excited I am about it, the more, you know, I feel like I can sell it, right? So if I can like run to my editors and say, hey, this amazing idea, then it's going to elevate their excitement. So I feel like I can definitely champion ideas. Yeah, I mean, it's, and the way that it works at Smithsonian right now is the editors kind of will meet like on a bi-weekly basis, and they'll discuss the pitches and then get back to me on which ones have been greenlit. But if there's something I feel really strongly about and really want to do, then, you know, then I can make it happen too on that level.
Okay. Marisa?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that I think at most publications these days, nothing is done by one person. There's all kinds of layers of editing and reporting and web producing and all kinds of different things. And it's actually really great for collaboration. And I think at the New York Times, at least, photo editors recently have a lot more power to pitch visual stories, and the newsroom understands that visual stories are actually very compelling and they attract a lot of different kinds of readers than regular written stories would.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's been a big win for us. So we definitely do have a lot more room to, you know, pitch stories that come from a visually driven space instead of just assigning photos for a story that a reporter has conceived. But at the same time, we still do have to go through those layers of editing. But as Quentin said, if we're very excited about the story, we can usually make a case for it to run.
Yeah, that's great. Very true. Anybody else on that?
That's why it's important that your pitch is sound and you've like done the work when you send it to us, because if halfway through our process of getting it approved by our desk and editors and all this, you come back to us and say, oh, actually, this is not true, or this is not thought through, that puts us in a situation where it's, yeah, great.
Denise.
I was going to add on to what Kathy said earlier about having a big folder of images, which I love to, you know, go through a bunch of photos, you know, make sure that those images have captions, right? You don't want to get to one where you're like, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've seen in 10 years. And you go look at the IPTC and you're like, I don't know what this is, right? Like, so you have 2 minutes to bring your pitch to somewhere else and the information's not there. So if you're sending a large amount of photos for people to look in and to digest, the words need to accompany that.
Speaking of words, which is a great segue, I was wondering about you know, the written part of the proposal. Like how much does that influence versus the photographs, and you know, whether the grammar is right and things are spelled good and all that kind of thing. I mean, is that all part of the package that you're considering when you're looking at a pitch? Anyone?
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten pitches to Mr. Quentin Nardi, and I get it, you know, I have a weird name, it's okay. But like, just, you know, come on, just check your grammar. Because I feel like if you're going to shortcut the, you know, the text part of it, like what other corners are you going to cut? So, you know, just polish it. We've got spell check. It's not hard.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
A lot of photographers though who they can't, they're wonderful storytellers and they really know their subjects, but they're not necessarily great writers. So, you know, you'll get a proposal in from them and you know it's there. And if you trust them and if you like their photography, then it's always worth taking that time to polish it and get it into some sort of shape so that it is presentable. And then, you know, there's always this situation where English may not be someone's first language. So, You've got to, again, if the idea is there, and if you really want to work with that photographer, that's part of your job, I think, is putting the effort into shaping the proposal.
I always suggest to photographers to ask a friend who isn't 100% like knowledgeable about your project and let them read it, because sometimes we give it to the person that's closest to us who knows it anyway, and we're all in our heads. So find someone who's not really that familiar and get them to read it and see if it makes sense to them.
That's great. How do you sort of distinguish between, a photographer that you know, or maybe you've worked with before, and they're sending you a pitch, versus somebody totally new, never worked with them, and they're sending a pitch? Like, so is that a difference for you? And then how do you deal with that?
I'm actually harder on the photographers I know.
Yeah.
For every photographer, even if you're close to an editor or producer or curator, or you know them, you're friendly with them, say friendly, still treat them like you don't know them and professionally, because I sometimes get so annoyed when I know this work so well and it's so much better. Why did they just send us this? And I get frustrated when I look at the fence, like so many great photographers don't make it onto the fence because, quite frankly, look, the voting is a very democratic way of doing it. So they're not going to get chosen. And the same thing with Photoville. So that's what I would suggest. Anyway.
Olivier, what do you think about when you get pitches like from the people you don't know versus people you do know?
So the one thing to understand first is that, like, I probably get about 300 emails a day. There's emails from photographers, but also from work. There's so many communication that still happen over email within the news organization. So if I'm going to see a name that I recognize, the email is going to pop out for sure. And I'm more likely to look at it right away. But it doesn't mean that we don't look at all the other emails. And I think that, like, if you're a photographer that never worked with that particular editor, what's most important is what you're going to include in that email. How you're going to, like, get my attention and think, okay, I don't know this person, but I'm reading this and this sounds interesting. And I think that's the most important part. Like, and it's the same thing when you're doing portfolios. Like, a lot of people we know, we see, and, like, embrace when we see them, but, like, we're still looking for these new voices. We're still looking for these photographers that we've never worked with before.
What do you say, Denise?
That's really kind of, I mean, that for me, it's not my reality, right? Like, so I'm a local newspaper. I have a staff, and I do meet with, when we were in a building, I would meet with freelancers once a week, just because I, just meeting people, seeing work, giving them contacts. And, for me, I'm always looking for the next hire, right? If you ever, I think every photo editor in my position has a small list of people that they would hire if they could. And so I'm always looking at new and fresh work for those purposes. But for me, collaboration with independents, for us, it takes quite a bit. It takes quite a bit of moving things around. And that's definitely not a solo decision. But there's so many good ideas and so many good stories that are happening out there, just to be a part of them and seeing them and helping develop the stories out there.
Kathy, what about the person you don't really know with an idea versus the photographers that you do know and you've worked with and their ideas?
If I don't know you, I would really rather start with a portfolio. I'd rather get to have a sense of your work before we start talking about your ideas, because I think ideas have currency, and if you're bringing an idea to me and I don't think you're the right person for it, right away that sort of is a speed bump in trying to build that relationship. And I've known some photographers for years, and watched them grow before we felt it was right to assign them to a story for the magazine. So I would really rather get to know you as a photographer before we start talking about ideas. I think it's just a better way to build a relationship.
And back in the day when we used to go to events and look at portfolio reviews, that was a great opportunity to meet a lot of new photographers and see their work and kind of keep them in mind for the future. What's the way to do it now without those events? What do you think, Marisa?
I think that it's just another opportunity to be open in your pitches if you're doing it over email. For example, the reason that I might be more willing to talk to a photographer that I know about an idea that they've pitched is because I know I can have an open conversation with them about how to mold the idea and make it work a little bit more for my publication and my needs, or to fit the beat that I'm covering. So if you're a new photographer that I've never met before, I'll definitely still take a look at it. And if I think the work is strong, we can have that conversation. But I think showing that openness up front and showing that you're open to kind of molding the idea to what works for different people would go a long way too.
Yeah, anyone else on that? Because I was going to say, I think there's also a differentiation between I've done a project, here are the pictures of my project, would you like to publish them in some form or work with me on it, versus I have an idea, I have not photographed it yet. Are you interested in me doing this idea and paying me to do it? So could you guys talk about that difference between the, and is it better for the new photographer to come in with an already photographed idea and then try to pitch it to you, versus coming in with, I'd love to go to Tibet. How about Tibet? And then they write your proposal, right? But they don't have any pictures from Tibet and they've never been to Tibet. So let's talk about that a little bit. Because I think
you'd be surprised by the number of photographers who pitched that way.
Yeah. That's the topic versus the story too, right? Tibet.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, if you've never worked with me before, I am not going to spend 10% of my budget sending you to Tibet to do something that is abstract. And that's I'm much more likely to look at a new photographer who has a very defined idea, knows that they can do it, and is able to explain it in the right way.
Mm-hmm. So Quentin, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, Sarah, this is kind of an important topic for me, the kind of the difference between an existing body of work and pitching a concept. Because, okay, so Smithsonian Magazine's 10 issues a year. We do 2 double issues. So the July-August issue, which is just coming out soon, we've just closed it, and the Jan-Feb issue are double issues. And what that means is that 30 pages in the well is devoted to photography. I mean, it's incredible. And, it's just an amazing, it's so sorry. It's an amazing.
Who's got the dog? Raise your hand if you have a dog.
I was just waiting for that to happen.
Oh, God.
Anyhow, so my point, we have 30 pages twice a year, and I need existing photo essays. I don't have the budget. I can't send. So basically what that means is basically that 30 pages gets divided into 3 photo essays of 10 pages each. Mm-hmm. And we tend to, sometimes in the past, it's been those 3 essays have been kind of loosely linked by kind of a general, overarching concept, or they're just completely different. But regardless, I don't have the money to send 3 different photographers on assignment to do 3 different original bodies of work. But what I do have is a project rate that I can pay a photographer to bring me a body of existing work that has not been published. And so this is a really great opportunity for photographers to, try to place that body of work that they've worked on that doesn't have a home yet, and send it to me or to my colleagues. And so I do for me, I do like that kind of existing work that doesn't have a home yet. I need there's 2 times a year when I really need those emails in my inbox, because we're looking for that unpublished work.
Cool. Laura, do you have are there equivalencies in that idea for Photoville or galleries or that you know about? Do they prefer? Do you prefer? You want to see the pictures, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
A lot of the projects, I think a lot of the times, and we get so many photographers and also editors who come to us because the story's there, it's published, and then what next? because on a 24-hour news cycle, we're on to the next thing. And there's some extraordinary photo stories. And so that's where we've actually really come in the last 10 years of actually taking something that was on the pages of like the New York Times or Time Magazine and then kind of creating a bigger world for it. Or things that were published on Medium, or, I mean, majority of the time is we've actually pride ourselves, we work with a lot of photographers who have a really popular story, but haven't, and you'd think, half the time we'd think, oh, that's gonna be in this publication or there, and no one's taking it. So to us, I mean, usually something that's completely formed as an exhibition is important. And also you can't really control who sees, especially with Photoville or public art, can't control who sees it. It's out there for the world. Mm-hmm. And you have to be very careful and very methodical because there's no editing. Like that, all your publications, if you post something online and something's wrong, you can put a little correction. When you put it out there as an exhibition, it's a little harder to do that.
Kathy, do you have anything to add?
You know, I think obviously we love it when people come in with packages. You know, we can pick them up and mold them to the storytelling that we need to do. But I also think that if someone does come in and you know, they're showcasing their portfolio and we like what we see, then we'd be willing to talk to them about a story as well. So I think it also really depends on the platform, whether it's print, that old thing, or digital. You know, where we feel it will have the best display. So I think there are options in there.
Mm-hmm. Do you, at a certain point when people are pitching ideas, or maybe this comes later, are you interested in the costs, the budget that it might take to do that story? Or is that something that you would control in terms of saying, well, I have this much money, can you do it for this much money? Where do you think that, how does that work for all of you? Denise, how does that work?
That's definitely, I mean, I'm a local newspaper, you know, money is, so that's definitely not in my wheelhouse. So I'd be interested to hear, you know, how you guys manage that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we get the budget for the year, and that means like, we have to plan like what we're going to spend for the entire year. And we don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. Like this year, for example, has been insane with news. Like my desk started with a potential war in Iraq. Then we went into like Iran, then we went into COVID, and now there's protests around the world with George Floyd, you know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next month. And so I need to plan the budget for the entire year. And so I need to be able to like work with the photographer to make it work for my budget.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Marisa?
Yeah, I'd say that on our end, the editor definitely needs to define the budget, but it's something that we can work out depending on how many days you need to be working and what the travel expenses look like and all those kind of things. And also if it's a really big blowout project, like for example, last year we did the Portraits of the Women of Congress project, and that definitely ended up being more than we thought it was going to be. But at the end of the day, we decided that the outcome and the product that we produced was worth the cost, and we were able to make some adjustments for that.
Good. Let me see my next question I want to ask. Going back to, well, this is an important question. So when you get an idea from somebody, how much do you consider that idea in terms of them being inside the culture, living locally, maybe speaking the language, versus, you know, getting that photographer from somewhere else and bringing them to the story? Do you want to see, I mean, if somebody's pitching you an idea, they don't live there, they've never been there before, I mean, versus finding the local photographers who can, you know, is that a jump? If I'm a local photographer, does that help my pitch because this is in my backyard and I really know this culture? Can you all talk about that a little bit?
I feel like having inside knowledge of the story that you're pitching is extremely important. It doesn't necessarily have to mean you live right there, you live in that community, but having been there before, having relationships with people in a community, or even just doing your research and having made some phone calls in advance makes a huge difference. I think it's just hard to underestimate the value of having people from inside a community tell a story. For example, my husband is from Ghana, and we worked together there for many years. And there were several interviews that we would go on, and at the end of the interview, he just walked away. And I would ask, why didn't we photograph that person? I thought we were going to do it on video. And he would be like, oh, they lied to us. Everything they said was a lie. And you don't, like, especially if you're dealing with people who speak other languages and you're dealing with a fixer or a translator, you're never going to know that if you're not in that culture or you don't have experience with a certain community. So I think that adds a huge value to pitches.
What do you say, Denise?
Oh, I totally agree with Marisa. I mean, I'm not talking on an international level, but there's so many great photographers here in Philly. I have a staff that's fantastic. I would say half of them are from Philly, and they've taught me so many things just about the Philly culture, right? I'm a nomad by trade because I moved every 2 or 3 years when I was a kid. So I don't have like a particular home. And so I go into these cities and I learn the cities, but the Philadelphia photographers have taught me so much about the city and just about local culture, even the language, right? I know we're in the US, but there are certain words that I was like, what? You know, like, and they're like, no, if you're from Philly, you know, and just not even my staff. I've met some really great photographers in Philadelphia who know the culture and can tell it in a special way. So I totally agree with Melissa.
Laura?
I think this is also something that we're all trying to be better at. And I think as an industry in whole, I mean, I come from the theater world. And so I think every industry, every creative industry, every information industry is kind of this is not something new that people are just talking about it now. It's important. We've been commissioning a lot of projects in the last 2 years. And as someone, and usually it's because we're hired or we're contracted with an outside organization or a foundation to do a project. And it's been really interesting to go back and forth with certain people about why we should be hiring a local photographer. And we did a project last year with the city of New York. And it was a big conversation about us making sure that it was a local young male photographer purely because of who he was going to be working with. And then working with that photographer, and it wasn't just we gave him the assignment, he had to pitch us the project and the proposal. And so that really worked, but it's important. And I think everyone's working on it across the board.
Olivier? Hi. Just talking about, the benefits and the
so like for me, when...
Go ahead.
So again, going back to budget, like for me, it makes a lot more sense to hire local photographers around the world. Not only because it allows me to save money than like flying in a photographer, but also, as Marisa said, like the local photographers have a knowledge of the issues, they have a knowledge of the culture, they have a knowledge of the importance of these stories that not all photographers coming from outside would get. I'm not saying that like outsiders should never do these kind of stories, but there's an added benefit to having a local photographer. So like I always try to find a local photographer to do the stories that I'm assigned in the region that I'm taking care of.
And Quentin?
Well, and just, yeah, Olivier said it very well. Like if I can, it's part like, financial, like if I can get a photographer who's based in Vietnam to do a story on Vietnam, I'm going to do that financially, but I'm also going to do that just from a cultural kind of, sensitivity point of view, because I know that photographer is going to be able to tell the story way better than somebody who's not from Vietnam. So, but in terms of the pitch, like that's kind of an assignment, but in terms of a pitch, if somebody pitches me a story that they feel very passionate about, or they're very, into doing, and they can kind of make a good argument for why they should be doing a story as an outsider, I'm receptive. I'm open to hearing, you know, what you have to say. But I do think that it's a lot to be said for having that inside knowledge. But definitely open to hearing, you know, different points of view for sure.
Kathy, can you talk about that too?
Yeah, I agree with what Quentin just said. I mean, if someone comes in with a great idea and they can make, you know, again, the compelling case for why they're the right photographer to do it, then let's have the conversation. But, you know, I think we're all, as Laura just said, having the internal conversation about, you know, best practices and building out our base and considering working with local photographers. And I think it's really an important moment, and I think we all are trying to think long and hard about making these assignments. But again, I think that is occasionally the difference between the assigning versus the pitch coming in.
True. I think that also on that note is, you know, I agree. I mean, I know when I was still at the Geographic, we were looking into a lot more hiring local photographers or in the region who had, you know, special connections and expertise on an idea. And I think that if you're, and you can tell me if you agree with me or not, if you're an outside photographer, it's exactly what you're saying, Kathy and Quentin, like, why are you the best person from that job? What makes it, you know, it could be like, well, you know, I've been studying, you know, Mandarin for 20 years and I speak Mandarin and I'm not from China, and I used to live there, but, you know, it is that list of things that makes you the perfect person for that job when you're going to be going into a different culture. Does that sound true to you guys?
Yeah, and I think there's also the personal experience of the photographer. Maybe this is a subject that like deeply affected them personally, and they can bring that difference to the work in that way. There's a lot of things to consider when a photographer is pitching and when a photo editor is listening to that pitch. But like, this is one of the questions I always ask on portfolio review: why you and not the 20 other photographers in that room? Like, what do you bring to the story that's different?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day too, it's really about what's going to result in the best pictures. And you really want, and the way to do that is to spend time with human beings and to actually, you know, have a window into their lives. And I feel like a lot of times subjects are more comfortable with people that, you know, are from the same place as them, or people who can talk to them and have a real conversation. And that could be an outsider if you have the right relationships. Doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who grew up in the same community, but it definitely goes a long way to get the subjects comfortable with you and to have them open up their lives to you, especially for somewhere like the New York Times, where you're not really going to have more than like 2 days to a week for like a big photo story to shoot it. Unfortunately, like National Geographic, we won't have many months to get into a story. So we really need those connections to be made in a few days.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about how photographers can access photo editors. Now, I'm not going to ask you to tell us all your emails at this moment, but what's the best way for photographers to get into meeting photo editors or accessing? Is it back to sending that email with the awesome PDF of pictures, or what are the best ways for photographers to sort of find photo editors?
I can tell you, for me, being new here, just meeting everybody locally, I was getting so much email on 2 different accounts, and one day I got a postcard. It's like, this is gorgeous. And every couple of weeks I get another postcard, and finally I just called him and was like, hey, let's go have coffee, you know, because it was a very patient way of saying, I'd like to get a chance to meet you. And he was very patient with me being new, and I just thought it was so lovely. So that was very different, and I think that was probably the most creative way. I mean, I'm not in the office now, so I can't get mail, but I just thought that was very innovative and patient, a patient way to meet somebody. And he had my name spelled right. I'm with you, Quentin. I get a lot of My name is different. It's spelled different. It was the 70s, so I totally get it.
I agree on the knowing to spell the name. I'm Olivier. There's a I before the E, not Oliver. It's important.
Yeah.
It's the little things that like differentiate yourself. Like I'm working with photojournalists, and the big part of the word photojournalist is journalist. And you need to prove that you're able to be a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're writing to me on Facebook saying, I don't have your email, here's the pitch, you do a Google search and my email will be on the second result.
Mm-hmm.
So it tells me that you didn't even do a Google search on me. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, like a freelance photographer is running a business, and you need to know how to run your business. And part of that is knowing your market. And knowing your market is knowing photo editors, knowing how to contact them and how to reach them. If you're not able to do that, it sends me the message that you might be a photographer, but the journalist part is not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. So how often, and we're getting to almost the end of the hour, and we'll open up for questions in a few more minutes, but how often are pitches by photographers actually accepted as a story versus maybe pitches by writers? I mean, or how often would you say that you're accepting and assigning or buying the package from photographers at your various locations and publications? Quentin?
I mean, I think we have a pretty good track record. I have to say, I'm like just, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but I mean, the pitches that I forward on, like, okay, what clears me, what I am excited about and what I love, I have a pretty good record. I mean, I would say it's, I don't know, 75, 70%. And I mean, the thing is, like, we don't have a lot of assignments. So I wish I could assign, 10 times the stories that I do. It's just, but what I can get through are pitches. And then again, this kind of goes back to the established photo essay versus the concept. Mm-hmm. But if I'm excited about it, I can pretty much get it approved. So it's good.
Call Quentin.
But listen, before you call me. So the other thing I wanted to just say, I know we're running out of time, but
no, we have time.
When we were in the office, like when life was normal, like I just wanted to touch base on this real quick. You could email me or my colleagues, and we would love to have you come into the office. Like if you were in Washington, D.C. and you were making the rounds, that's kind of how I love to meet photographers, is face to face. Like, you can email me. I may or may not get back to you. It just depends on, what my day is, whatever. But like, you can like when we go back to normal, because we will, you email me, you come into the office, you meet me, you show me your work, and then you're on my radar. And that's really the way that I like to do it. So.
And you'd be surprised by, like, we don't get that many emails saying, I'm in town, do you want to meet for coffee? There's a lot of photographers who don't think about doing that. And sometimes we do want to get out of the office and get coffee and around the corner. Mm-hmm. It's an excuse for us to, wind down and
Kathy, how about you?
Well, when I was photo editing, I was pretty niche. So I had a pretty good track record of getting proposals approved. I think, at the Geographic, when a photographer gets a proposal approved, you've got a pretty good idea that you're going to be able to sustain that visual narrative. It's going to carry the pages. I think our challenge always is that sometimes, in spite of how good the ideas may be from the writers, it's like, oh my God, where are the photos? How, they're going to do 4,000 words and we can think of like 2 photographs. It's like, oh no. So, I mean, that's always been, the internal tension with that writer photographer story proposal at the Geographic. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I mean, I'd much rather, someone stop by, that we had a chance to meet. I don't like to talk on the phone that much. I'd much rather have that FaceTime with someone.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Laura?
We were very famous, especially when we were at the gallery, for people just popping in and really happy. And I'll be completely transparent. The last 4 years of having a child and working other jobs, because our team, we all actually work other jobs too sometimes to make ends meet. It actually is harder to meet people in person. And I can't have that drink after work anymore. Or I can't, because I have to rush out at 5 to go pick up Violet from there. So I think it's also about patience. And I think that, I think it never hurts to say, love to grab a coffee, I'm in town, or a quick phone call, or I can send you something. Just be flexible, because sometimes there's photographers who kind of constantly like, but we should meet. And I honestly don't have the time. So I think, but I'm happy to receive your work. And going on Denise's on the postcard, I love a good postcard. And actually, we've actually done quite a few shows of like photographers sending us a postcard, because then we'll put it up there and then, that worked. I think that's really effective, because it's up on our desks and on our walls and we get to see it all the time.
Cool.
I think for me, it's a little bit different, because our, as we call them, independent photographers, right? The freelancers, we do a lot of daily work, because it's Philly, it's a lot of sports. And so you kind of get put on the role to do daily work. And, you know, every now and again, you'll see somebody's work, something that they've done previously that we can commission for another job. So we have a freelance photographer who, she was our intern, and now she's an independent contractor. She's on her own, Margot Reed, and she was working on another project for something else, and we were in a story meeting, and another photo editor was like, doesn't Margot have some work she's been working on? Let's see if we can commission that for this project. So for us, it's a little bit different. It's more like daily work, daily turns, and that kind of thing. But I love going to tea. Like, that is my thing. I love meeting people. I'm like, let's do coffee, let's do tea. I try to go once a week, you know, when we were in the office. But I really, you really get a sense of a person. And I would say, when you go and meet tea or go and have coffee, don't beat yourself up, right? When you go show your work, don't say, oh, you know, it's not as good as it could be, or, oh, you know, this is terrible. But I think be strong, stand confident. We're here, you've got our attention. So don't beat yourself up when we do meet you.
Is that a good time, that little coffee chat or the tea, I love the tea time chat. Is that a good time for them to pitch ideas? Like if it's just a meet and we're gonna look at my portfolio, and while they got you to pitch an idea?
Daily work, I know for you guys, it's probably like some projects and other things, but a lot of times I'll see somebody, if they send me an email and say, hey, you know, I'd like you to look at my stuff, I'll follow them on Instagram right away and then go back. And so for me, it's kind of like keeping up with them, what they're doing. And every now and again, you know, I'll say, hey, I saw this thing a couple weeks back. Can you tell me about it? Or I saw this thing on your website. You know, I see the work that you want me to see, but I'm really interested on what you put here. Can you talk about that?
That's great. So I think we have a lot of questions, Kurt. Yes. I think maybe we'll start taking some questions.
Yeah, this was really, really good. You know, we have 68 questions so far, but you know, the magic of Zoom, we're just gonna do this very democratically. Like, people have been able to vote and downvote and upvote questions.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, so this is cool. I don't have to like pick them, right? First of all, thank you everyone for the insights. I think, you know, based on the questions and the chat feedback, I know most of you aren't looking, but this has been incredibly helpful for a lot of people.
Great.
I'll go to the first question from Sarab. I'm going to unmute your microphone now. Can you hear us?
He's still muted. Sarah, unmute your microphone. Maybe he's not, maybe we come back to Sarah.
All right. I mean,
I
can also read the question.
Oh, okay, great.
Do you prefer photos I'm pitching about to remain unseen, or is it okay to post on my Instagram and I'm going to assume other social media outlets and, you know, privately controlled publications, websites, etc.?
You mean so basically the question is if I have photos that I want to pitch to you, is it still okay that I'm sharing them on my social media?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
I
anybody?
don't know. Anyone?
Is that sort of the idea of is it no longer unique if they've already been putting it on their social media?
I think it's okay if it's on social media as long as it's not the entire project and it's not, you know, it's not been picked up by other outlets, embedded anywhere or anything like that. A lot of times the only way that we as photo editors will see stories is on social media. And as Denise said, we'll be interested in that, oh, that looked like something you were doing, but was it a full-fledged project? Was it just something personal you were working on? Like I recently have picked up a portrait project that ended up being very successful that somebody started posting on Instagram and they didn't even think of it as a serious pitch. And I knew them as a photographer and messaged them and said, you should pitch this when you do more. And it turned into a published story.
Cool.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? No? All right. So we're going to roll to the next one. The next question is, I guess, two questions. It comes from Katie Jet Walls. I'm going to unmute Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie.
I have to confirm that I want to unmute. There we go. Yeah, it's a two-part question. Part one, what's one of the best pitches that you've received and published? And part two, what's one of the best that you still had to decline?
Tough question. That's it. Go into your memory banks, everyone. Is there, go ahead, Olivier, you look ready.
One thing that's important when you're pitching is to know the publication and to know also the best timing for it. So I'll take the example of a British photographer who went on an island in Greece where they had a very specific Easter tradition of throwing hundreds and hundreds of fireworks at each other, competing sides, two churches competing against each other, and throwing these fireworks all night long. And what he did that was great is that he photographed the story, but a newspaper, the day after Easter, an Easter story is too late. So he kept the work hidden for 9 months, and then 3 months before Easter, came back to us and said, I photographed this last year, they're doing it again this year, but it's a tradition that's been going on for like dozens of years, and here's the work. And so we were able to package this and to publish it just a few days before Easter, which is the best part to do it. So knowing that timing and knowing what publications do and at what time they do it is great.
Interesting.
Here, I have a really good one. Can I tell you?
Right.
Okay, so just real quick. So Melissa Grew, she's a wildlife photographer. She came to us with a pitch on snowy owls. But it wasn't just snowy owls, because I mean everybody loves snowy owls, but there was like this crazy eccentric researcher who like was the foremost expert on snowy owls that she actually had become friends with, and she got like an in with him. It was also, she was willing to go to Alaska, I think like 3 or 4 times to kind of document like the different stages of like the baby snow, the chicks, and then like as they got older. And there was also research coming out from the Max Planck Institute in Germany that kind of like then the next couple of months when we would have gone to publication that was releasing research about the snowy owl. So basically what I'm saying is she had a trifecta, and there was no way we in a million years would ever turn that pitch down, and it was fantastic, and the photos were incredible.
I think the quote for that panel is going to be, everyone loves snowy owls. I gotta keep that one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you have something, Olivier? Did I hear that? No? Okay. All right. So the next question we're going to take is from Annabelle. Annabelle, I'm going to bring you on. Yep.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing this, everyone. I just wanted to know, is it best to only pitch to one publication at a time? And if we don't get a response, should we assume you're passing on it, or do you like to be followed up with? It becomes the great waiting game whenever I've pitched in the past, to know if I can go to the next person or not. That's it. Thank you.
What do y'all think?
I don't think it's, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I don't think think it's realistic to only pitch to one publication at a time, honestly, especially for newspapers. I mean, I would love to be the only person you're pitching to, but for your own sake, I feel like you probably should pitch to more places at once. And I think editors will completely understand if they respond and you have to say, I'm sorry, another publication actually responded first. I think we all understand that it's tough being a freelancer and it's hard to get your work out there, and that, you know, there's not only one outlet in the world. And for following up, I'd say editors often will not respond, and you definitely should follow up. I'd say wait a week or a little, like between a week or 2 weeks, and then follow up again. If you don't get a response after the second follow-up, then they're probably not going to respond.
Good, great.
Thank you.
I mean, I would say I agree. I would pitch to everybody that the story's right for, and then, you know, maximize your opportunities and see who bites first, right?
And that's the thing, like if two bite, you need to be open about this. Like,
yes.
you know, like you don't want to be like surprising the photo editor where suddenly the piece is published at the Washington Post and the New York Times on the same day. That's a good way to burn bridges.
So in that case, wouldn't the publication kind of request some kind of exclusivity?
Yeah. Contract.
Yeah.
Those. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like if this is in the case of just like cold emailing people you haven't talked to, so you're sending that first initial email, like this is the pitch I want to do, and then once somebody starts having a conversation with you about it, then you should really stop talking to other publications.
Cool, right.
And this goes for everything. If you're pitching to publications for a book, exhibition, cast a wide net, but be incredibly transparent and give it a week or two when you follow up.
But I think, you know, to Olivier's point, you know, he's getting 300 emails a day. So, you know, if you don't hear back, I think it's worthwhile to follow up, because, you know, there's so many times in the course of a day, you read an email and you think, oh, that's great, I've got to get back to that person. And then a week does go by and you're like, oh, I forgot all about that. So, I mean,
we're humans.
Yeah.
We're humans with a very long to-do list, like work and personal, and especially right now with everything that's happening in the world. So yeah, you want to follow up. You don't want to turn into a stalker that's like emailing and calling every day. It happens. But yeah, like it's important.
Good, thank you. So we're gonna go to the next question. I think this is important. This is a good one because there are a lot of young photographers who are part of our community. This one is from Olivier. I'm going to unmute you. Are you there?
Another Olivier.
Hi. So
Hi.
specifically for you, you mentioned that you'd rather see portfolios of young photographers before pitch stories. Would that be done via email by a photographer presenting himself and his areas of expertise?
Who was that for, Olivier?
Katie.
Katie?
Oh.
No.
Kathy.
Kathy. Oh, okay.
Yes, I mean, whether you know, send me a link to your work, you know, whether we have a Zoom meeting, since we're all in the Zoom world these days, you know, I've met so many of the contributing photographers at National Geographic. You know, I met them at portfolio reviews or at various festivals, and you know, again, you're able to make that connection. You know, you have the opportunity to actually to talk, to get to know each other, to look at the work. That's, you know, I think it's a much better way to go to sort of build that relationship and let me get a sense of your photography before we start talking about story ideas. I think that's kind of, you know, that's the second date, not the first date.
It's a courtship.
Good. Good. All right, so these are really great questions. We still have 73 open questions, but you know, we have quite a bit of time left. So we're gonna go to the next question. Pimenta, Marcio
Pimenta. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're live.
Marcio, unmute your mic so we can hear you.
I can just read it.
Okay.
how do you present big and long-term projects? I have the impression that publishers don't like projects that big. How to present them?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, I would just say that it's big and long projects. It really depends on the publication. Some publications, might like your idea or your project enough to do a 3-part series or something, right? But it really depends on the publication. It sounds like in some cases, I don't know, Quentin, would that be something that would a big long-term project work for Smithsonian?
Yeah, it could. I mean, there's been times when we've sent photographers. I mean, not quite like National Geographic, but times when a photo assignment has gone over, maybe a couple of seasons or half a year or something like that, and I like, again, I feel like regardless how long your project is going to take, again, we're still talking about that kind of concise pitch, and the pitch still needs to you still need to get that pitch approved, and it's going to get approved if it's a nice, concise pitch. And it could be a year project, but I mean, I think that the pitch really needs to be definitely crafted in such a way that it's going to get our attention.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of comes back to the pitch in terms of, regardless how long the assignment or the project is, you want the pitch to be good and concise to get the attention of the photo editor.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Go ahead, we'll take the next one.
So I guess there was a question that I think came in through the chat box, and I guess I'll ask it on behalf of the user. Kind of jumping around a bit, I guess it's my question. In light, one of the things that is stuck out in this conversation is like assignment versus project. Mm-hmm. Kind of understanding those two. I've heard several of you kind of give a distinction there. In light of kind of where we are in terms of media and life in general, there have been an overwhelming amount of photographers of color who are looking for, or who would like to tell, I guess, the story of the moment from their perspective. So, assignment versus project, and how has, I guess, those new voices or that new issue shaped the way in which you work?
Mm-hmm. Olivier, what do you think? How does that, I mean, you're right here in DC in the thick of the news and the protests. How is that mostly been covered by staff, or is there opportunities for emerging photographers who are also down there shooting this huge story?
So this kind of huge story is usually a mix of both. So one thing to know is the Washington Post is one of the few newspapers now with still staff photographers. We still have 16 staff photographers on staff. So for the protest in Minneapolis, like what we've done is like we sent a staff photographer, but we also hired local photographers. I don't cover national news. I cover like international news. And this is one thing that I try to do, is always find the local voices that are able to tell the stories from there's a perspective that they can bring. It's not always easy, and it's not always foolproof, but this is, I see as my role as a photo editor.
Mm-hmm. Denise, what do you think? How does it work in Philly?
I mean, for me, I'm like Olivier. I have 16 photographers, 13, 14 maybe, and 3 videographers, something like that. I have a large staff. And so the question for us becomes, how do you collaborate, right? How can you be creative and do something different? While all this is happening, understanding the seat that I sit in, my primary concern last week was that my visual staff make it out alive, right? We took a lot of care with them for coronavirus, and then boom, Philly explodes. And so there was a lot going on at one time. And so now that this week has been quieter, right? It has been less dangerous in terms of putting them in situations. Now, how do we tell these stories? There's so many stories to be told. I went to a Black women photographers group. It was like a meetup, or it was a workshop last year in Philly, and it was a room full of like 150 women. I was like, what? This is amazing. And you know, there were journalists there, but there were all kinds of Black women photographers. How do we get that group together, or how do we get groups together to tell stories in different ways, collaborating with the local newspaper, which would be us? And so that's something that's been put on my plate, to figure out how to tell these greater and larger stories with our voices, but in collaboration with the community. And so I'm just, full disclosure, I haven't figured it out yet. But it is, you know, on my list and on my heart to figure out, because there's a lot of visual storytellers that have these unique voices that need a space to express that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well put.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We're doing really good on time.
Yeah, we have like 6 minutes.
Yeah, 6. Joe, we always kind of give a little bit of leeway.
Okay.
So, you know, keep the question votes coming. This is actually fun watching questions kind of
come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to start looking at it.
So the next question is going to be from Pradeep. We're going to try to get you to answer live. If not, we'll just, there you go.
Hi, good evening. This is Pradeep. I'm from Northern Virginia, and I'd like to thank all the panelists. This has been a great hour and a half, learning a lot, enjoying a lot. So I had 2 questions. One of them has already been answered about sending the same pitch to multiple publications. We heard that. Thanks for that. And the other question I had, that when you get a pitch, my question was, so what really would stand out in a pitch, like a striking image, or an interesting opening paragraph, or the story headline? And what would really, you being a photo editor, what would really catch your attention? Because as you were discussing, a photographer may not be a good writer. So what really kind of catches your attention, or the uniqueness of the subject, or a combination of both? So I'm trying to assess on that.
I think from a photo editor's perspective, the photos are definitely going to be the most important thing. But at the same time, if you're getting an email, the first thing you see isn't the photos. You're probably going to have to scroll down to the bottom of the email to see the photos, or to download a link, or however you're attaching them. So an important, strong subject line and explaining, you know, in a few short sentences why we should actually care about this story are also very important. But at the end of the day, it's going to depend on the quality of the images. For me.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on that? I'm Pradeep.
I think from an exhibitor, again, festival, exhibitions, gallery, it's always about a story of images. And so I've found in the last 10 years that there are some great stories and photographers who have that one amazing image, but then the rest of the images or the story don't do it justice. So we usually like to look at at least 3 to 5 images that tell that story. And as Marisa said, a really strong pitch, your elevator pitch, is so important. So those 2 combined, I think, could be the winning ticket.
Yeah, and I find what I'll do is like what Marisa was saying is I'll get the email and I'll kind of scroll through the text maybe at first, because I just want to get to the photos. And then if I look at the photos, I'm like, oh my gosh, these photos are amazing. Then I'll go back up and, you know, read a little bit more. So, you know, it's all about the photos and to me.
Cool. Thank you. I guess we can do maybe 2 more questions. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. Quentin mentioned existing bodies of work that hasn't found a home yet. If someone has a long-term project, like that is a couple of years old now, when is it too late to find a home for it? So essentially, you've been working on a project for a long time. You've developed a body of work. Maybe time has passed. Like, I guess they're trying to figure out this idea of timing.
Is it relevant to the publication?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I wouldn't necessarily put an expiration date on it. You know, I mean, if it's still relevant, it's still relevant. So I'll take it. I want to see it.
Cool. And I think, Olivia, you gave a really good example of a photographer who pretty much sat on a body of work for 9 months because it was relevant to.
But that could have backfired on the photographer.
Yeah.
There's always that risk. Like maybe suddenly they decide that throwing fireworks at each other is not a safe thing. They stop doing it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. We're just going to go to the last question. And it's from, I guess, Olivier again. Actually, let me find another one. This was actually one that interests me. Do you like it when, actually, I'll see if the attendee is there. Natalja? Are you there?
She's gone.
Okay, I'll read it. Do you like it when a writer and photographer pitch together as a package? I asked that question because I remember kind of the beginning where we talked about being flexible and, you know, maybe not having the right combination and leaving room for the photo editor to make suggestions and things. So that's kind of the last question we're going to take today. Anyone?
I mean, just real quick, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a, not pet peeve, I think that's probably overstating it, but like, you know, if you're going to pitch a body of work or an idea to me, let us pick the editor, I mean, the writer, excuse me, because I just feel like I think, you know, the key word is flexibility. You want to kind of like be able to kind of do, you know, maybe work with the magazine or with the publication and what they need. And oftentimes, you know, I think Kathy said it earlier, you know, we might have differing opinions on who the writer should be. So I think it's just stronger and maybe just to kind of pitch the photography on its own.
Thank you.
Kurt, I don't know if we have time, but I was hoping that maybe each panelist could, their one last little tip that you want to reiterate.
This is perfect. I was going to hand it over to you next.
Okay, fine. I would just say if we could have each of you just, what's your one final tip you want to leave all of our listeners with? Like sort of on the, we started out with the things that can go wrong, maybe talking about a tip about like how to make your pitch perfect. Let's see. Olivier, why don't you start? You're right there. Because you're right there next to me now in this little thing.
For me, like going back to what I said in the beginning, the most effective pitch is whether you're able to explain it clearly in 2 sentences. I always use the example of the elevator pitch. You know, like if you find yourself going into a festival or portfolio review and you're suddenly in an elevator with the photo editor you have always wanted to work with, are you able to explain your pitch in the 3 floors that you're going to share together?
Great. Quentin, you're right there.
Yeah, going back to what I said in the very beginning, you just make it relevant, make it count for whomever you're pitching, in terms of like a story that they could actually be excited to take to their editors about.
Denise.
I would say expand your network. You know, the photo world is very small, and you know, expand who you're talking to, and just be open and be coachable.
Laura.
I would say know your audience. I think it's really important when you're pitching to whoever, whether it's an editor, a festival, a gallery, understand, you know, who are you telling your story to and making sure that that platform is the right one to reach them.
Good. Marisa.
I 100% agree with the know your audience tip. But another tip I'd say is just don't give up on the pitch. You can always find another editor that it might be better suited for. You can follow up with the person if they haven't responded. Back when I was a freelance visual journalist, I had one story that I was very passionate about, and it took over a year for it to get published, but it eventually did, and it worked out well. So I just say don't give up on those things.
Kathy.
I would say don't take no, because we don't take your pitch, it doesn't mean we're not interested in building a relationship with you. So don't take no as a non-starter. I mean, we took the time to say no. So keep the relationship going if you can.
Great.
Thank you. What about you, Sarah? What do you have to add on that subject really quickly?
Be the expert about the topic or the story that you want to tell. Find the way to differentiate yourself from everybody else who might be thinking about those same ideas. I would say try to find ways to be that expert on that story, and that I think goes a long way.
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank each of you for participating today.
Me too. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You too, Kurth.
You're welcome. Hopefully when we resume, I saw someone in the chat said that they wanted to meet everyone in person. So, hopefully when we resume and open back up and our festival is in a building and we're seated and mingling, everyone can join us. But before we close, I just wanted to thank our sponsors who make it possible to bring you this free programming each week. We actually had 2 programs today, which is crazy. Fujifilm, Tamron, Multiple Exposures Gallery, Peak Design, Capital Photography Center, and KEH Camera. Be sure to join us next week for Lauren Kaur and Leah Mills, who will join us to talk about documenting Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. They'll share their images and talk about what it's like to be, in the middle of Hong Kong's struggle for democracy. Very relevant, very powerful stories. We'll also be posting the video from tonight's talk on our website and YouTube page. There will also be a recording posted on the Focus on the Story Facebook page. And yeah, thank you. Finally, thanks again for having us, and have a great weekend, and special thanks to Sarah, right? For
pleasure
pulling us together. And yeah, thank you.
And thank you, everybody, all you panelists, for doing this. Maybe someday we'll have the panelist reunion, and then we'll invite all these folks to bring us their portfolios too. It'd be so much fun. Really appreciate it. I hope it was useful for all of our listeners. And thank you, all of you guys, for giving your time and sharing your expertise. It's so important. I would say this is the silver lining of the quarantine. Moments like this that we never did before. And the fact that I can be in the same room with basically with all of you is super special. I just love it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.